Is it true you've never served? A young officer smirked. The girl sat at the end of the table, wearing a simple white shirt, head down, not answering. The whole dinner party laughed along, but then the door opened. A commander walked in, eyes heavy with purpose. He walked straight to her and placed a folded flag right in front of her. Then he stood at attention and saluted. No one dared laugh anymore. Her name was Elise, 31 years old. Petite frame, long blonde hair tied low, calm eyes, no military insignia. Elise worked in medical equipment transport at the rear support base. She was always cleaning meal trays after meetings, delivering medical documents and supplies, always smiling, never talking much. Everyone recognized her face, but nobody knew who she really was. One evening, the base organized a dinner to honor newly assigned officers. Elise was invited to handle logistics coordination. A group of young officers invited her to sit at their table because there was an extra chair. They asked casually, "Where did you serve?" Elise smiled quietly. "I used to be on the front lines." One person burst out laughing. "So you drove supply trucks?" Another added. "Or maybe you guarded the medical supply boxes." A third officer chimed in. "Come on, someone like you? Front lines?" Elise remained silent. She just continued eating. No reaction whatsoever. The conversation continued around her, as if she wasn't even there. "I bet she worked in the mess hall. Or maybe she was a clerk filing paperwork." "Definitely not combat. Look at her." The young officers exchanged glances and snickered. One leaned closer. "What's the most dangerous thing you've ever done? Carry a heavy box?" Elise took a sip of water and still said nothing. She had learned long ago that some stories weren't meant for dinner conversation. Some truths were too heavy for people who had never carried real weight. So she sat quietly, listening to them laugh, watching them joke about things they didn't understand. The officers continued their banter, talking about their recent deployments, their training exercises, their career ambitions, all safe stories, all clean stories, stories that ended with everyone coming home. Elise nodded politely when spoken to, smiled when expected, but her eyes carried something different, something the young officers couldn't recognize because they had never seen it before. CTA comment Act 1. Have you ever seen a good person being disrespected? Comment, that's unfair. During the meal, one young officer asked casually, "What's your name anyway?" "Elise." "Elise Novak." The officer pulled out his phone to search the name, then suddenly went completely silent. On his screen was a black and white photograph of a woman standing next to a burning helicopter, red bandage tied around her arm. The headline read, "Sole survivor of frontline medical unit, Battle of Red Zone 2014. But the identity section was blurred out. The officer's face went pale. He whispered to his friend, who also looked at the phone, then at Elise. At that moment, an older nurse sitting nearby spoke softly. "I've heard that name before. Novak." Back then she was a sergeant, single-handedly pulled 5 people out of the wreckage. The young officers looked at each other, unsure. "That can't be her. She's just what?" the nurse asked firmly. Nobody answered. One officer leaned closer to Elise. Is that really you in the photo?" Elise looked at the phone screen, her expression unchanged. "That was a long time ago." But you're just a transport worker now." Elise smiled sadly. "Some people prefer quiet after loud." The atmosphere at the table shifted. The jokes stopped. The laughter died. Questions started forming in their minds. How many people did you actually save? What happened to your unit? Why don't you wear any medals? Elise stood up, preparing to leave the table. The past should stay in the past. But as she gathered her things, the dining room door burst open. A figure in full military dress uniform entered. Commander Riley, the highest-ranking officer on the base. His expression was serious, purposeful. He scanned the room, then his eyes locked on Elise. The entire dining hall fell silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Silverware stopped clinking. Even the kitchen staff peeked out to see what was happening. Commander Riley walked directly toward Elise's table, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. In his hands, he carried a folded American flag in a presentation case and an official certificate. The young officers at the table immediately stood at attention, but the commander's focus was entirely on Elise. She remained seated, looking up at him with quiet recognition. "Commander Riley, Sergeant Novak." The title hit the room like a thunderbolt. Sergeant, not transport worker, not logistics coordinator. Sergeant, CTA Comment Act 2. If you've ever misjudged someone, comment, "I was wrong." Commander Riley stood before Elise, his voice carrying the weight of official ceremony. Elise Novak is the last surviving member of Medical Unit Delta 7. He held up the folded flag and certificate. She didn't just save 5 people. She carried back the complete medical records of her entire lost unit. The room was dead silent. Every eye was on Elise, who sat perfectly still. Commander Riley continued. On October 12, 2014, Medical Unit Delta 7 was providing frontline support during the Battle of Red Zone. Their position was overrun. Sergeant Novak was the only survivor, but instead of evacuating immediately, she went back 3 times. The young officers' faces went white. She pulled out Corporal Martinez, who had been trapped under debris for 6 hours. She carried Private Chen, who had lost both legs, to the evacuation point. She rescued Specialist Rodriguez, who was unconscious from smoke inhalation. She dragged out Sergeant Williams, who was critically wounded but still alive. And finally, she went back for the unit's medical files, because she knew their families would need to know what happened. Commander Riley's voice grew softer. By the time she reached safety, she had been in the combat zone for 14 hours. She had suffered second-degree burns, a dislocated shoulder, and severe smoke inhalation. But she refused medical evacuation until she was certain all recoverable personnel and equipment were accounted for. Elise looked down at her hands. Commander Riley placed the flag on the table in front of her. "You declined the Medal of Honor ceremony. You declined the Purple Heart presentation. You declined the Bronze Star recognition. You requested transfer to non-combat duties. You've been here for 3 years, and nobody knew." He stood at attention and saluted her. "I'm not asking for your permission this time. I'm returning the flag of your unit as its last guardian." Elise looked at the flag, then at the faces around the table. The young officers who had been joking now couldn't meet her eyes. She spoke quietly. "I don't need recognition. I just need people to remember that they existed." She picked up the flag, holding it carefully. Corporal Martinez wanted to be a doctor after his service. Private Chen was saving money to buy her parents a house. Specialist Rodriguez had a newborn daughter he never got to hold. Sergeant Williams was 3 weeks from retirement. Each name, each story, landed like a physical blow. The young officers realized they had been laughing at someone who had carried the weight of 4 lives for almost a decade. Elise stood up, flag in her arms. "Thank you for remembering them, Commander." She walked toward the door, then paused. "To everyone here, serve with honor, because someone, somewhere, is counting on you to come home." She left the dining hall. The room remained silent for a full minute. Commander Riley addressed the young officers. "Let this be a lesson. Heroes don't always wear their medals. Sometimes they wear aprons and serve quietly. Sometimes they clean tables and deliver supplies. Sometimes they carry ghosts so heavy that the only way to survive is to disappear." One by one, the young officers left the table. None of them finished their dinner. CTA Comment Act 3. If someone has ever sacrificed silently and you never thank them, comment, "I owe someone." From that day forward, Elise continued her quiet work, transporting medical supplies, cleaning equipment, organizing inventory. But now, People began to notice her differently. They nodded respectfully when she passed. They made way for her supply cart. They said thank you when she delivered documents. Some officers would stop and ask, "Is there anything you need, Sergeant?" She would always smile, "Just Elise, and I'm fine." But the respect remained. One morning, about 2 weeks later, Elise was gone. Her workstation was empty. On her desk was a handwritten note. "Thank you for letting me live like a normal person. Now, they can finally rest in peace." Next to the note was her name tag and a small photo of 5 people in medical uniforms, her unit, her family, her ghosts, on the wall of the medical bay. A new frame appeared, a photograph of Medical Unit Delta 7, and beneath it, an inscription. Because someone survived, their story can still be told. Nobody knew who had put it there, but everyone understood. The young officers who had mocked her quietly visited the memorial. They left flowers. They left notes. They left apologies. Commander Riley received a transfer request, already approved by higher command. Elise had requested assignment to another remote base. "She's still serving," he told his staff, "still carrying the weight so others don't have to." The flag she had been given remained in the memorial case, with a small plaque, "In honor of those who serve in silence." Sometimes, late at night, personnel would see someone standing by the memorial, a small figure, blonde hair, quiet presence. But when they looked closer, no one was there, just the flag and the memory of 5 people who had given everything and 1 person who had carried them home. CTA Comment Act 4. Comment, "I will live with kindness if you believe everyone deserves to be remembered." Elise didn't need to be honored. She just needed her fallen unit to be remembered by name. In our noisy world, there are people who choose silence because they've heard the last cries of others. Not everyone without a uniform is an outsider. Not everyone who smiles and cleans tables is nobody. Because sometimes the person called nobody is the one who preserved the honor of an entire unit. Live with kindness. And remember, don't let worthy people bow their heads. In a room that doesn't know what has already happened, look closer at the quiet ones. The ones who serve without asking for recognition. The ones who carry weight you can't see. The ones who smile while holding ghosts. They might be the strongest people you'll ever meet. They might be the heroes you never recognized. They might be the ones who saved others when everyone else had given up. So before you judge, before you mock, before you dismiss, ask yourself, what story might they be carrying? What sacrifice might they have made? What love might they still be protecting? Final CTA. If this story touched you, comment, "I see the invisible heroes," for everyone who serves in silence.